Okay, bonjour. Uh, uh, Ogechida Indigenous cause. Um, I'd like to tell you where I'm from so you know who's talking to you. My mother's people were what's called Michif. And 13 generations ago, when the Ojibwe had been advancing into Minnesota and bumped up against the Dakota, they sometimes had skirmishes and wars. And So the Dakota had been defeated, and they were smarting from battle when they ran into a band of Cree, and they wiped out all the men. That left a whole band of Cree women without men, and they fled into the tundra below Hudson Bay and stayed there for a while with their children, and then they came out later and made it back to their home territory, which was near where Winnipeg is today. And they were camped on one side of the Red River. Meanwhile, back in Scotland, probably around the time of Braveheart, the Scots had been getting overrun. The English were trying to take control of them. And so a band of Scottish chieftains decided to find new territory for their people because they did not want to be like the English or live like them or be under their rule. And so many of the chieftain clans got together and came across what is now Canada. And so when the women had come out and were camped on one side of the Red River, the Scottish chieftains were camped on the other side of the river. And there were all these men that hadn't seen women in a long time, and all these women who hadn't seen men. And they eventually got to know each other, courted, and some of them married. And the first children, when they were reached 16, were taken back to Scotland to meet their father's people. And the Scots kept half the boys because the clan went through the male line, and the other half came back. They adapted the ways of the women, and so they became buffalo hunters. They had a pipe, they had the Sundance, and that was the life. They had chosen the life of the women. And so that's my mother's people. My mother was the 13th generation from them. And then on my father's side, were Anishinaabe and a bit of Huron, because my grandfather, who was Anishinaabe from Michigan, from Keweenaw Bay, his father was mixed from the east, and he was part Huron and part white man. And um, and then the others, my grandma, they came from originally from Madeline Island, and actually my cousin did a trace on the family tree, and actually my grandma and grandpa on my dad's side were actually seventh cousins from Madeline Island. So um, the blood there is mostly Anishinaabe. So that's who I am. That's who my ancestors were. My dad's people had villages on Basswood Lake, which is now the biggest lake in the Boundary Water Canoe area, and I raised both my sons there. It was a 4 hour trip from where I parked my car. It was a 4 hour trip after that, canoeing and portaging to get back to our home in the middle of the wilderness. And it was a beautiful and good time there. And anyway, so I had wanted you to know who I am. And this is my opinion on what's happening nowadays. It's like a crucial time for Native Indian people. And I wanted to explain why I'm a Trump supporter. Um, Native people have never been included. They've never been included since way before Trump in anything in this culture in the United States. They have never been acknowledged for everything they contributed to the world and made to feel good as a people. Some of the things that they contributed was the concept of zero, which transformed mathematics, because when the white people came here, they were using Roman numerals, for one example. Another big example is that 67% of the food eaten in the world today was cultivated by native people of North and South America. Point number three is that in North and South America, our people had a way of being. Women were not oppressed. You didn't have oppression of women. You didn't have kings, and you didn't have the few on top controlling the many on the bottom. That was not any concept in Indian culture. And when you look at the yin yang symbol of Asia, where they show a circle and they show one side is white and one in black, and then in the middle of the white there's a little black circle, and in the middle of the black there's a little white circle, showing that the potential, the majority may be like this, but there's always a potential. So yes, we did have that kind of potential. When you look at, say, how the Aztecs were, that was the potential. When I look over across the sea at all the other countries that are controlling in the world today, China had a military, they had kings, Europe had kings that were oppressing the majority of people. But the country over there that wasn't like that was Mongolia. And Mongolia today still keeps most of its integrity as a nation. The Mongolians were the only ones over there that knew to take care of their water. They built, they never camped within 5 miles of any water source so they could keep it clean. But in North and South America, Indians kept their waters clean. That's why they had no disease. While in India, China, Europe, they were throwing shit, feces, garbage in the water, drinking it, and then they would have the bubonic plague or this plague or that plague. That was common over there. They never learned that you can't contaminate the water, or you contaminate all life. You contaminate yourself with disease. So Trump comes along, and he's the first one that has spoken openly. The people are endangered now of being taken over again, only this time by globalism, where a minority of 1% want to control everybody in every country. And they've almost got it sewed up. Trump came in at the last second and threw a monkey wrench into their plans of total takeover here. And when he talked about NAFTA, I knew what he was talking about, because in '85 I wrote a column for Ojibwe News out of Bemidji where I talked about NAFTA and how it would destroy this country. And I was of mixed feelings about that because I'm an Indian, and I'm thinking, well, maybe these guys deserve it because of what they did to us. But no, that's not true. There are innocent people everywhere that are just doing the best that they can do with what they got. And you can't be blaming everybody. And then I wanted to talk to you about 1985. My dad was up fishing in the middle of the Boundary Waters. He was an old man then. And he was way out in the middle of nowhere by himself in the wintertime, ice fishing. And the Forest Service gave him a citation. So Ely City Council, by decree, were very angry at the treatment of my dad. And so they, and this is a white town, descendants of miners. And the first people that came in there and founded that town, that's who they were. That old guard is gone now. Now Ely has people from everywhere. But back then it was still the old guard. And so they became angry, and they made a motorcade, and they sent it to court with my dad in Duluth, backing Indian treaty rights. They said our ancestors made a deal, made treaties with Tommy Chosa's ancestors, and we want those treaties upheld. Well, all those people that did that, those people are Trump supporters. You won't see the leftists doing anything like that, standing up for Indians. Not really. So I wanted to make that point. And then when I first moved into Cook, I had another experience where it must have been a couple months after I was there. You know, I was thinking to myself and I know how beautiful the land could be by living in the middle of the Boundary Waters, where it's pretty much unscathed. It's been touched, but it's unscathed compared to other places. And so I know what's there, and I know what I see and what I've experienced. It's beautiful, and people wouldn't even recognize some of the things that are there in nature. If only you were sensitive to it. Um, cut.
Oh, yeah.
I lost my train of thought. The cat knocks me out. Yeah. Um, I forgot where I was going with that.
What was it you were saying?
I was talking about the beauty of nature. Oh
And
yeah.
about Cook.
Okay. Okay. I got it. Anyway, so at Cook, I was, and I often do it. I think of all the things that people are really missing out on when they're not in nature. It kind of reminds me of this bumper sticker I had that made the church really mad and ely. And it said, I would rather be out fishing thinking about God than in church thinking about fishing. And that kind of says it. Um, so I was thinking about and thinking about what people are missing, and it would upset me that people couldn't see this. If they did, they would protect nature much better than they do. Anyway, so I was poring over this in my mind, and I had to go to the auto parts store in Cook, and so I went in there. I didn't really know a lot of people there, and when I walked into the store, the man started, I was the only customer that came in, and he started crying out loud. He said, Indian people really knew how to live, and we've messed it all up. We've messed it up. The Indians knew how to do everything. They knew how to do it, and credit too. And he's sensitive to nature too, and to other people. And I believe he really loves people. Like I said, in '85, I wrote for Ojibwe News, and I wrote about NAFTA. That was one of my articles, and that I could see what it was going to do to the country. Why are they doing this? Why would they bag out their own country? You know, and sure enough, all the corporations left, took their jobs with them because they could get cheaper work in other countries. People pay them 50 cents an hour, and then bring all their goods back here and sell them to Americans without any taxation for bringing them in. So naturally, they set it up for that, so they could rip people off and bag out the country, equalize the portum around here. And anyway, so Trump's the first one I heard even mention that, who had a big platform and running for president, and he said we've got to change that. It's destroying this country. And right away I knew what he was talking about. That's true. You know, finally we got somebody who's going to stand up for the people. And yeah, maybe he doesn't know things that we know, and he's from a completely different background, but so what? He's doing the best that he can do for who he is. You know, he stepped out of his cushy life, and let me tell you, those bastards are trying to shoot you every chance they can get, and they have murdered people. So he came in with his own protection, though, and that's good, and they've been doing a good job. So he's for protecting the people in this country and their rights, you know, and I think that's a good thing. What's going on at the border, it's just another one of their scams, you know, like Bush, he's one of the globalists, went into the Middle East and bombed the hell out of Iraq, just like the cavalry came and killed all the buffalo so they could take control of the Lakota, the Plains Indians. The same thing, they went into Iraq and destroyed everything. And they went all over under Clinton. They went all over the place, killing and maiming people and destroying them over there. And then they used them. They're all shot up and messed up. Used them for refugees to flood Europe with, so they can take Europe down, take control of them. And now they've done the same thing, gone to South America with their corporations, making money off of cheap labor, displacing a lot of the natural people. So they don't have a home, don't have any income, can't make a living off the land like they were doing before the Contras and Sandinistas were shooting each other up and killing the Indians in the mountains. So they're down there, they've raised holy hell, and now they're driving those people north to invade here so they can destabilize this government. Now the people themselves, the poor people, are are innocent victims. They're victims, and they're being used, and they don't care about them, because once they take over these countries, those people will be kicked to the curb just like the rest of us will be kicked to the curb, and they'll have power. So, and then I think a lot of them that are coming in are also a front line for actual war. So you've got groups of young men marching, and you've got other groups with women and children. And so you've got both, and they'll use women and children as shields when they first come in. They won't care what would happen to them. So the people here have got to maintain the sovereignty of their country and their borders. Now, they didn't do that in Europe. They did not protect their borders. Here we got to do that because we see what's going on over there. And we don't want that. We want the integrity. All people must have integrity, including Indian people, for who they are. We all need integrity. We all need the rainbow. They all can't be one color. They're each different and unique and beautiful in their own right. And that's how I see all people. I don't want to see everybody mono, everybody dressed alike, looking alike, acting alike. I don't want to see that. The Great Spirit didn't make it like that. They made chickens, they made eagles, they made ducks, they made many kind of birds, many kind of fur-bearing animals. Nature is not mono, and we should not expect to be mono. But what we should have that's mono is love and compassion and respect. That's it, all I wanted to say.